On June 15, 1389, in the rolling plains of Kosovo Polje, two armies collided in a confrontation that would echo through centuries. Serbian Prince Lazar Hrebeljanović gathered his warriors and allies to resist the relentless advance of the Ottoman Turks under Sultan Murad I. Though the battle ended indecisively, its legacy became one of the most enduring in Balkan history, a tale of sacrifice, betrayal, and national identity. The Battle of Kosovo was not just a clash of swords, but a turning point where myth and memory fused with history. The 14th century was an age of shifting powers. The once mighty Byzantine Empire was in decline, reduced to a shadow of its former glory, and new powers rose in its wake. In the west, the Kingdom of Hungary eyed the Balkans with ambition. In the north, fragmented Slavic states sought unity, yet often fell to rivalry. In the east, a rising force, the Ottomans, began their inexorable march into Europe. The Serbian Empire under Stefan Dušan had once been a dominant Balkan power, stretching from the Adriatic to the Aegean. But Dušan's death in 1355 left the realm fractured, divided among regional lords. Among them, Prince Lazar Hrebeljanović emerged as a central figure, a man of piety and diplomacy who sought to unite the Serbian nobility against the common threat of the Ottomans. Meanwhile, the Ottomans under Sultan Murad I had consolidated their rule in Anatolia and Thrace, establishing a foothold in Europe with their capital at Edirne. Their army, disciplined and diverse, contained Turks, Balkan converts, and fierce Janissaries, the Sultan's elite corps. Their expansionist drive put them on a collision course with Lazar's Serbia. By the late 1380s, the two forces were destined to meet. The fertile plain of Kosovo, lying at the crossroads of the Balkans, became the stage upon which fate would play out. The road to the battle was paved with skirmishes and shifting alliances. In 1371, the Ottomans had shattered a coalition of Balkan lords at the Battle of Maritsa, sending shockwaves through the region. Many Serbian nobles submitted to Ottoman suzerainty, paying tribute and supplying troops. But Lazar, ruling from his court in Kruševac, resisted. In 1387, Lazar scored a temporary victory against the Ottomans at the Battle of Pločnik, where Serbian forces ambushed and routed a Turkish detachment. The victory emboldened Balkan resistance, but it also drew Murad's wrath. The Sultan resolved to march personally into Serbia with a vast army, determined to crush Lazar and secure Ottoman dominance once and for all. As Murad gathered forces from Anatolia, Asia Minor, and vassal states, Lazar assembled his allies. He was joined by Vuk Branković, his powerful son-in-law, and a contingent led by Bosnian nobleman Vlatko Vuković, sent by King Tvrtko of Bosnia. Estimates of numbers vary wildly. Some chronicles claim hundreds of thousands, though modern historians suggest closer to 30,000 on each side. Both armies converged on Kosovo Polje, a wide plain near Pristina, chosen by both sides for its strategic openness. On June 15th, the fates of empires collided. The morning of June 15th, 1389, broke over Kosovo Polje with heavy skies. Chroniclers describe the plain as a sea of grass and shallow rivers, the air thick with tension. To the west stood the Serbian forces under Prince Lazar, banners of the cross fluttering above armored knights and levied infantry. To the east stretched the Ottoman host under Sultan Murad I, a vast and disciplined force of cavalry, infantry, and the feared Janissaries, their drums and horns echoing across the plain. As the sun rose, both armies performed rituals. Serbian priests blessed the soldiers, administering communion, while bards recited heroic songs to steel their courage. On the Ottoman side, muezzins called prayers to Allah, and warriors sharpened their blades, confident in their sultan's might. The Serbian forces, numbering perhaps 25,000 to 30,000, deployed in a traditional formation. At the center, Lazar commanded his household knights, supported by heavy cavalry in shining armor. To the right stood Vuk Branković's troops, a mixture of noble cavalry and infantry. On the left, the Bosnian contingent under Vlatko Vuković, seasoned fighters who had seen action against Hungarians and Ottomans alike. Behind them waited reserves of archers and peasants armed with spears. Opposing them Murad's Ottoman host may have numbered between 30,000 and 40,000. The Sultan himself oversaw the center, flanked by his elite janissaries. To his right commanded his son Bayezid, known as Yildirim, the Thunderbolt, famed for his ferocity. To his left, his other son Yakub Çelebi directed additional cavalry. Light infantry and Akunja raiders formed the vanguard, while the corps of Sipahi cavalry stood ready to charge. It was a meeting of two worlds, the armored chivalry of Serbia against the disciplined, flexible Ottoman war machine. As dawn passed into mid-morning, the battle began with a thunderous cavalry charge. Serbian heavy knights, armored in mail and plate, lowered their lances and surged forward, their horses pounding the earth in a deadly wave. At their head rode Miloš Obilić, a knight of legend whose name would echo through the centuries. The charge smashed into the Ottoman front lines with devastating force. Chronicles describe the initial Serbian assault scattering light infantry and pushing deep into Murad's ranks. Ottoman Azap infantry fell in heaps, and even seasoned janissaries were forced back. For a moment, the Serbian cavalry seemed unstoppable, a tide of steel cutting into the heart of the Ottoman host. But the Ottomans were masters of absorbing such shock. Bayezid's cavalry wheeled into action, countercharging the Serbian right flank with terrifying speed. Arrows darkened the skies as Turkish archers poured volleys into the advancing knights, their horses screaming as shafts struck. The muddy terrain slowed the Serbian mounts, blunting their momentum. What began as a glorious charge turned into a grinding melee. At the heart of the battlefield, Lazar's men clashed with Murad's janissaries. The janissaries, disciplined and unyielding, locked shields and countered with spears and scimitars. The air was filled with the clang of steel on steel, war cries, and the screams of the wounded. Ottoman cavalry began to envelop the Serbian wings, pressing Lazar's forces into a tighter knot. The Bosnian troops under Vuković fought fiercely, holding the left against Yakub Çelebi's men, but the sheer numbers of the Ottomans began to tell. Yet the Serbs fought with desperate valor. Chronicles describe them cutting through enemies in waves, driven by the knowledge that their homeland stood behind them. It was not just a battle for land, but for survival. By midday, Kosovo Polje had become a charnel ground. Mud mingled with blood, and corpses littered the field. Both sides suffered grievous losses. The Serbs had struck hard, but the Ottomans' discipline and reserves allowed them to regain balance. The first stage of the battle, the Serbian charge and its partial success, was over. What followed would be a brutal test of endurance, treachery, and legendary sacrifice. By midday, Kosovo Polje was a cauldron of blood and chaos. The Serbian charge had torn a hole in the Ottoman lines, but the disciplined counterattacks of Bayezid and Yakub began to close the gaps. Serbian and Bosnian knights fought desperately, their lances shattered, now wielding swords, axes, and maces in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The Ottoman cavalry pressed harder on the flanks, seeking to envelop Lazar's center. Still, the Serbs refused to yield. The field became a grinding contest of attrition. Armored knights against swift horse archers, heavy cavalry bogged in mud against nimble Sipahis. But amid the clash of armies, a single act of daring would decide the battle and echo through legend. According to Serbian tradition, the knight Miloš Obilić had been accused of treachery on the eve of battle. To prove his loyalty and redeem his honor, he swore before Prince Lazar that he would strike at the very heart of the enemy, Sultan Murad himself. Whether the tale is truth, embellishment, or later myth, it became one of the defining moments of Balkan memory. Obilić left the Serbian lines under the pretense of desertion. Crossing the bloody field, he approached the Sultan's camp, where Murad had remained in the rear directing his troops. Some sources claim Obilić disguised himself, others that he feigned surrender, but all agree on the outcome. He gained access to Murad's tent. What happened next is shrouded in mystery and legend. One account says Obilić drew a hidden dagger and stabbed Murad in the stomach as the Sultan received him. Another describes him striking suddenly in the chaos of camp, cutting through guards to reach his target. Ottoman sources also acknowledge Murad's assassination, but differ on details, some suggesting he was slain after battle. Whatever the means, Sultan Murad I fell that day on the field of Kosovo, the only Ottoman sultan ever killed in battle. Obilic was cut down immediately by Murad's guards, but his name lived on as a symbol of sacrifice and courage. For a moment, the Ottoman camp fell into confusion. The death of a sultan was a blow that could have shattered morale. Yet, Murad's son Bayezid the Thunderbolt acted swiftly. Assuming command, he concealed his father's death until the fighting was over, ensuring the army would not falter. On the Serbian side, Lazar's forces were heartened by the news, but their position was dire. Surrounded on multiple fronts, their lines were breaking. The death of Murad did not stop the Ottoman machine, and Bayezid's ruthless leadership pushed his men harder into the fray. As the afternoon wore on, the Serbian army began to collapse. Vuk Brankovic's contingent reportedly withdrew from the field, either retreating to preserve their forces or, as later legends accused, betraying Lazar. This left Lazar's center exposed. Prince Lazar himself fought bravely, but was eventually captured. Accounts vary on his fate. Some say he was executed on the battlefield by Bayezid's order, others that he was taken prisoner and executed the next day. In Serbian tradition, Lazar became a martyr, the prince who chose a heavenly kingdom over an earthly one, sacrificing himself for the faith and his people. By evening, the battlefield was strewn with the dead of both armies. Serbian resistance had been shattered, but the Ottomans had paid a terrible price, including their sultan. Neither side claimed an outright victory that day. Yet in the long term, the balance of power was clear. The Ottomans could replenish their armies, while Serbia's strength was broken. The death of Murad was a dramatic moment, but the turning point of Kosovo lay in the exhaustion of Lazar's forces and the relentless endurance of the Ottoman war machine. When the sun finally sank behind the hills of Kosovo Polje, the field of blackbirds was transformed into a sea of silence, broken only by the cries of the wounded. Thousands of corpses, Serbs, Bosnians, and Ottomans alike, lay heaped across the plain. Horses, knights, peasants, and janissaries lay tangled in mud and blood, their banners trampled into the earth. Chroniclers describe the battlefield as a place where the living could hardly move for stepping on the dead. Streams ran red, the air heavy with the stench of decay. For days after, carrion birds circled endlessly above the field, giving the plain its infamous, almost prophetic name. The Ottomans held the field, but it was no triumph. The death of Sultan Murad I, coupled with heavy casualties, shocked the empire. His body was interred at Kosovo, his entrails buried on the battlefield, while his remains were carried to Bursa, where his tomb still stands. For the first time, the invincible image of the Ottoman war machine had been dented, yet the machinery of Ottoman expansion endured. Murad's son, Bayezid I, quickly consolidated power. His ruthless decisiveness, executing his brother Yaqub to prevent a succession struggle, ensured that the Ottoman advance would continue unchecked in the years ahead. On the Serbian side, the loss was catastrophic. Prince Lazar's death left Serbia without a unifying figure. Though his widow, Princess Milica, assumed regency, Serbia was forced into a position of Ottoman vassalage. While some Serbian nobles still resisted, the tide had turned irreversibly. The once proud Serbian state, which had rivaled Byzantium under Stefan Dusan, entered a long decline. For the Balkans as a whole, Kosovo was less a single decisive conquest than a harbinger of the future. Ottoman dominance inching steadily westward, Serbia weakened, and the balance of power irrevocably altered. Even as bodies still lay unburied, legends began to grow. Serbian monks and bards cast the battle not as a simple military defeat, but as a spiritual victory. Prince Lazar, slain after choosing the heavenly kingdom in a vision, became a martyr and saint, his sacrifice a symbol of eternal faith. Miloš Obilic, the assassin of Murad, became a folk hero, the archetype of loyalty and courage, celebrated in epic songs for centuries. On the Ottoman side, Murad's death was framed as a noble martyrdom, slain in jihad against the infidel. His burial at Kosovo became a site of memory, sanctified by both history and faith. Thus, Kosovo entered not only chronicles but myth, a battlefield remembered less for its tactical result than for the stories it birthed. News of the battle spread swiftly through Europe. At first, many Christian courts celebrated the death of Murad, imagining the Ottomans broken. Yet hope quickly gave way to reality. Bayezid proved even more aggressive, consolidating Ottoman control and renewing campaigns across the Balkans. Hungary and Venice, eyeing the growing Ottoman threat, recognized that the battle had not saved Christendom, but merely delayed the inevitable. For the Serbs, Kosovo became the defining symbol of resistance, even as their independence slipped away. The paradox of Kosovo was that neither side truly won, and both sides lost enormously. But in cultural memory, it became one of the most remembered battles of medieval Europe. For the Serbs, it was a story of glorious martyrdom. For the Ottomans, it was proof of their endurance and divine destiny. The aftermath of Kosovo was therefore twofold: a military stalemate, but a symbolic turning point. From that day onward, Kosovo would live not just in the annals of war, but in the soul of nations. Over the following centuries, as the Ottoman yoke tightened over the Balkans, the Kosovo myth blossomed in Serbian oral tradition. Epic poems sung by guslars, bards, told and retold the story of the 1389 battle. Lazar became a Christ-like figure. Miloš Obilić became the ultimate knight. Vuk Branković, accused of betrayal, became the archetype of treachery. These songs kept alive a sense of identity during centuries of foreign domination. For the Serbs, Kosovo was not merely a memory. It was the defining story of who they were. Even beyond Serbia, the battle reverberated. Western chroniclers, upon hearing of Murad's death, initially celebrated, hoping that the Ottoman advance might be halted. Though the military reality proved otherwise, Kosovo entered European imagination as a struggle of Christendom against the rising Ottoman tide. For Hungary, Venice, and the papacy, it was a stark warning. The Ottomans would not be easily checked, and the Balkans had become the front line of the Christian-Muslim struggle. The legacy of Kosovo extended far beyond the 14th century. It became a national epic for Serbia, binding identity to sacrifice and faith, a rallying cry during future uprisings against Ottoman rule, a cautionary tale for Europe about unity and disunity in the face of conquest. Kosovo was less a military turning point than a mythic cornerstone. Its power lay not in tactics or casualties, but in memory. The legends shaped how generations saw themselves, their enemies, and their destiny. What makes Kosovo unique is that its myth eclipsed its history. In truth, the battle was indecisive. Both armies suffered catastrophic losses, both leaders fell, and the Ottomans ultimately endured. But in memory, Kosovo became a total symbol, the moment when sacrifice became identity, when defeat became eternal victory, and when nations defined themselves through legend as much as fact. The Battle of Kosovo stands as a paradox, a stalemate turned symbol, a defeat transformed into glory. For the Serbs, it was a sacred covenant of faith and sacrifice. For the Ottomans, it was proof of divine mission. For Europe, it was a harbinger of the Ottoman century to come. In the end, Kosovo's true power lies not in who won or lost, but in how its story was told. A story of faith, betrayal, heroism, and sacrifice that has echoed across 6 centuries. The field of blackbirds became more than a battlefield. It became the soul of nations.